Often as developers, we believe we have to know everything, be able to figure everything out by ourselves. As long as we get better and faster at coding, our careers will progress smoothly. But if you ask around, you will notice that most people feel stuck in their careers, despite years of experience. If you ask for career advice, people will throw you an endless list of complex technical skills to master. And that's not what you will find here.
Have you ever reflected on your career goals? Have you ever talked with someone who's doing the kind of work you want to be doing? The first step to growth is identifying what you want. Mina Slater is our guest for this episode. She decided she will never get stuck. She's always doing things that makes her uncomfortable, such as public speaking, managing people, and all sorts of things.
With more than a decade of experience with theater management before becoming a software developer, Mina has been progressing in her career as she wants. She even created her own role. This episode also addresses this fact. There is no right or wrong. Everyone has a different journey. And how do you make sure you are moving forward with your journey and not getting stuck? That's what this episode is all about.
You will hear Mina saying phrases such as, "How can I help my team?"
I take some time to reflect on my progress
And things such as people and peer mentoring.
and people's skills.
These are good ways to find opportunities for growth in your job, and those things appear organically.
Welcome to the Hex Devs podcast, the podcast that helps you become a Ruby expert developer. I'm your co-host, Stephanie.
And I'm Thiago.
But before we begin this amazing episode, are you a Ruby developer feeling stuck in your current position, not sure how to make the jump to senior?
Get to Senior is our online self-paced course that highlights stories from real Ruby developers who made the jump to senior and beyond. Learn how Tenderlove made the jump to senior. Learn how Chris Oliver kept his skills sharp. Learn how Rafael França learned all about Ruby on Rails. Learn how you can start doing senior level work even before you get the senior title.
Draw your own path to senior following our guided exercises and put into practice the strategies extracted from our interviews with our guests and map out your path to senior.
Go to hexdevs.com/senior and grab your Get to Senior copy right now.
Hello, everyone. We are so happy to be back with the podcast. And we couldn't be more happier than having Mina Slater today. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, Mina.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk all about career growth, career progression, and it's always good to look up for people that are doing what you want to do so you can extract some strategies and have some examples to follow. So Mina is dedicated to use her superpower for good, to connect to people and bring them closer together by contributing to meaningful and inclusive products. Since transitioning from a career in theater management, that's super interesting, she went to the Northwestern Coding Bootcamp in 2018. And since then, she has developed as engineer and consultant with specific interest in the backend and Ruby on Rails. Mina has also given some technical talks, and she has one that was delivered in the last RubyConf, and is really perfect for the discussion that we are going to have today. It's called Managing Out Strategies for Leveling Up by Mina Slater. Is that good, Mina? Do you have anything else to add?
No, that sounded really great. I didn't know I did all that in my career.
Sometimes you need someone from the outside to let you know that you are doing a great job.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We don't do these things in a vacuum at all. So
That's right. So, Mina, did you always know where you wanted to go in your developer career? The reason that I asked that is because you got started as an apprenticeship at Tandem, then you were moving up, and today you are working with something new. You are the hiring manager, right? So, how was this entire process for you? Did you always have this role in mind? How did you get where you are today?
yeah, like you said in sort of the introduction, I am a career changer. I worked in theater management for uh, well over a decade, and then when sort of I was burned out from that, decided to go to coding boot camp. Um, Honestly, I had some ideas when I was starting out in my dev career of how I wanted to approach this sort of a second chance at a career is kind of how I looked at it. There were things that I had done in my theater career that I decided, to learn from, and like things that didn't work, things that worked, or whatnot. And to be quite honest, besides that, I really didn't have sort of a what would you call like an end goal in mind. Honestly, like I can't really tell you maybe where I would be in 5 years now. So like I feel like I still don't really exactly like know for sure where I will be, right? So I think it's good to reflect on what you have done in the past, what got you to sort of where you are. And I'm really, I think, grateful for this opportunity to come talk to you because it, in a way, prepping for this conversation has forced me to kind of like reflect and look back on what I had done and where I had come from.
And is this your first kind of review, let's say, where you looked at your career and said, is this what I really want to be doing or not? So
Well, no, not at all. I have, I think, in the last 2 years during sort of the pandemic period, everyone's a little bit more introspective, I feel like, in these last 2 years of being kind of locked down and getting used to this sort of new normal. And I have actually been doing a lot more of that, just kind of taking stock of what I've done on a more intentional and regular basis. I think one of the things that I'm really grateful for is when one of my colleagues and I got together and decided to sort of kind of peer mentor each other to keep each other accountable to make sure that we're doing these reflections and have a space for processing emotions and things like that. So I got connected with Stephanie Min, who is also a WMVRB member. And she and I are kind of have been in this career for about the same amount of time. We're on similar levels in terms of sort of like skill, so that it's really nice to connect with somebody who like understands what you're going through and can help you process progress and emotions and things like that. Because I feel like sometimes maybe like folks who are earlier career or folks who are more senior and principal and much more experienced don't necessarily either remember or know what I'm going through. So
yeah, that's a really great thing to think about. Keep in touch with someone that is doing something that at the same time with you. Maybe even finding someone that is just a little bit ahead of you helps as well. Yeah, and you're definitely right. It's really good to look at people that have lots and lots of experience as role models, but then for you to kind of get from where you are to there, it's good to be surrounded by people that are doing what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. People who I think relate to what you're going through can
Mm-hmm.
help validate some feelings and, you know, progress and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to the next question. It's kind of related. You know, you already mentioned to this new situation that you and Stephanie is also going through. So, Mina, how did you approach taking these new responsibilities at work? You mentioned that you already had lots of experience in theater, and you
Mhm.
already tried to bring to your developer work what worked. But how are you evaluating on the day to day that those challenging things were moving you up in your career?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, actually. And so in my theater management career, I did a lot of what you would maybe similar to folks who are in sort of like project management and people management would do. So I came to a development and technical in my dev career with a lot of leadership experience already, and leadership and like organizational experiences. And so I think what I was kind of doing on a day-to-day basis is trying to bring those to the table,
Mm-hmm.
um, and see kind of like see these skills and see where and how they can benefit my team. For example, you had mentioned the sort of hiring coordinator, hiring manager role that I had taken on recently. And what that came from was having just being observant about my team, both folks that are ahead of me and folks who are earlier career than I am, and noticing that uh, our managers who were handling the hiring communication and the logistics part of the hiring process, and realizing that between code delivery and client expectations and their direct report responsibilities and being in the role of company leadership, our engineering managers had just so much on their plate that the two of them didn't have sort of enough hours in the day for everything that they are expected to do. And so I looked at that and I said, what can I, like, how can I help you? And what can I take off of your plate, right? Like, I can't really take off their plate their client expectation because they're on projects that are, they're delivering things to their clients that like I might not be involved in. I can't take their direct reports because I'm not a manager, and that is very specific to what they do. And certainly like I'm not qualified where I am to like run a company and be involved in sort of company leadership and decision making and things like that. So I went, okay, well, I'm organized. I we're all involved in interviews. I know how this our candidate tracking system works. I know how to send an email. So like, how about I help you make sure that our candidates are um, being attended to, like our candidates' needs are being attended to, that we are giving them a timely response. And really, I approached my manager with that idea mostly just as a sort of, let me take on a couple of tasks for you. And she went, and I think this speaks to how privileged I am to have just great people around me, because she then went to leadership and said, we have this need. Let's create a position for her and make sure that by taking on these extra work, she's compensated for it. And we kind of looked at it in a also in a scope where somebody, if I were ever to pass on this position, it would go to somebody who is interested in people management, but maybe either they're not quite there yet to be a manager, or they are not quite sure if that's something they'd want to do, to kind of get a taste into leadership. So that I thought was a really cool thing my manager did. She's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, congrats on the
congrats.
new role.
Yeah.
It's amazing this idea of kind of creating your own role because I've seen that happening in my
Yeah.
career as well. But I want to ask you about kind of the mechanics around that. So you mentioned, oh, I saw these problems in the company. I saw that my manager was stressing about something, I guess. I wanted to ask you, how did you notice that? How did you see that this problem is important and
Mhm.
I have the background and I can help you? So how did that happen? How did you notice those things?
Yeah, we at Tandem we have a very small engineering team, I think relative to some other companies. And so all of the engineers are expected and we really enjoy the opportunity to be involved in the interviewing process, right? So a candidate comes through our pipeline, they would meet with, I want to say, seven of our engineers. That's half the team. Um, so we have a lot of kind of visibility into the hiring process just by being involved in the interviews. And I think what we were seeing is sometimes candidates will sit in the pipeline for a little longer than we would like. And so I started having conversations with my manager and said, hey, I interviewed somebody so and so, last week. We haven't heard anything about, what the decision is, like what's going on there. And so I think like these kinds of conversations with my manager and leadership is where we kind of saw that maybe some folks were sort of falling through the cracks because our managers were just so busy. And that is not the type of experience that we want our candidates to have because interviewing and job searching is stressful enough. And I don't want, just by just by nobody's bad intentions, right, to
Mhm.
be forgotten about. That doesn't feel good for anybody. And we feel bad about that. So I thought that to live up to our company's values that we really have to bring our candidates a good interviewing experience. And I thought that it's like, well, I have a couple of hours a week. Let me help you with that.
Yeah, I think what I love most about that is you could have stayed just asking, hey, what is going to happen with this person that I interviewed? What happened? You could have stopped there, but you didn't. You no, this is not what I want for the company, for the team. I
Mhm.
will do something about it. So I think that's a simple thing, but it definitely makes a lot of difference. So kudos to that and congratulations, Ro.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm of the personality that I kind of have the drive to like solve any problem I see. And that's not necessarily like what every situation needs is somebody to be like, well, have you tried that to fix this like situation? But it worked out in this circumstance.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah, I love that. And it just confirms that most of the problems, of course, not all of them, but most of the problems can be solved once you clearly identify the root cause and the solutions are not technical stuff. It's just looking at things with a different perspective.
Yeah, software development is a people business, and I think that a lot of people don't recognize that or realize that. So
Mm-hmm.
I try to remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could say about any business, right? So it's always people. There's
Yeah.
always people involved. There's always a way to make things better.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mhm.
think it's really cool that you saw that the candidates weren't being treated the way you
To be
wanted to
treated.
be treated, and
Yeah.
also the company wasn't living up to the culture values, right? So we're
Mhm.
doing some the interviews, but it wasn't living up to the expectations or the cultural values, and you saw that gap, and then you say, "Oh, I'm gonna fix that."
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I think we hold ourselves to a very high standard, and so when when maybe we identify things that don't necessarily live up to that standard, it's really up to us to kind of pull ourselves and everyone else up to it.
That's always something good to remember.
Yeah.
Why are we doing what we do?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mina, since we are talking about crafting opportunities at your job, even though you already had some background in your previous experience as a theater manager, still I'm pretty sure you had to learn new things. It was still a challenging situation for you. How were you making sure that you were filling in the gaps, and how were you doing that in a daily basis?
Yeah. One of the things that I was saying that, I looked at my theater career and said, like, I did all these things, some of it worked, some of it didn't. And I brought some intentions and lessons learned from that to approach my deaf career. And one of those things is I thought that I was getting too comfortable in my theater career, and just like the choices I was making weren't challenging enough, and I wasn't kind of being put into situations where I'm uncomfortable and can learn. So one of the things that I brought into my deaf career when I first started was that I'm going to do things that make me uncomfortable. And one of those things was public speaking. I am an okay public speaker, but my nerves is a lot of times what gets me. And I'm definitely like not a confident public speaker at all. So I was like, okay, that thing scares me, so I'm going to do it. And so I did. And I very early on, even before I maybe hit a year in at my job, I was sending out proposals to conferences. And luckily, I think I was really lucky, honestly. Maybe not lucky is the right word per se, but privilege. One of my first proposals was accepted by RailsConf in 2019, and it was my first ever presentation at a tech conference. It was maybe my third tech conference that I had even attended. But what I use those opportunities for is not just attending those conferences and attending the workshops and talks that they provide me access to, and meeting people and networking. Even outside of that, what I do is I write proposals for subjects that I maybe don't currently have the knowledge to present on, but I want to learn more about, or just kind of have a sort of vague idea about. And when they're accepted, I use the talk preparation period as an excuse and opportunity to do a deep dive into these subjects. So I think couple things there, right? Like the skill of writing a proposal is what I'm practicing. And I think that sometimes we talk about in the tech industry, like our interviews sometimes don't reflect what we do on a daily basis. And I think proposal writing and public speaking are two different skills also. And so I think I have gotten a little bit better about writing proposals because I'm getting accepted a little more often than maybe I expected to. And yeah, so that's really interesting because it provides me a lot of opportunities to learn about a lot of different things that I'm like, I'm going to talk to your audience about this, so I'm going to learn it now.
Wow, that is so smart, because I do the opposite. But that is such a great idea. I love that. It's way
First you study and then you present? Is that it?
Well, usually I talk about something that I already wrote something about it, or already did something related to the topic. But it's mostly because I was more focused on getting started with putting myself out there. But I think that's also a great way. Like, it's a different way to approach this. So I loved learning that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, of course. I will also say that they're not always like subject matters that they're never like subject matters that I don't know anything about. They're always like inspired by like, I ran into a bug at work, so I learned about this concept. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm going to propose to talk about this concept. Now I'm going to learn more about it than I had the opportunity to just in the sort of work context. So it's more not necessarily an opportunity to like learn about something, but it's an opportunity to do a deep dive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a great justification, right? So
Yeah.
you're learning this thing, and then you kind of make a promise, or I'm going to present this talk about this topic that I kind of know about, but
Mm-hmm.
and then you
Exactly.
get accepted, and you have to do it. There's no
Mm-hmm.
other option, right? So you have
Yeah.
to do it.
I don't want to let thousands of people down or like event organizers. So it's a great motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way. And also, I think you touched on a very simple point here, which is you're not talking about the more complicated aspect of Ruby or whatever. It's something that you encounter at your job, you had to solve it, and you want to make that process easier for other people. So it's not about being smart, it's about being helpful.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I was told pretty early on, just a couple months into my dev career, is that we are all experts at something. So I think a lot of that's what really drove me to kind of like get into to say like I'm qualified to talk about some things. You know, I might not be qualified to talk about, I don't know, JIT compiler like Aaron Patterson did with you all. So that's not definitely like not something I'm qualified to talk about, but I can talk about my experience and something small that I learned, that there's always somebody, you know, even when I was an apprentice, there are people in boot camp trying to get to an apprenticeship. Or here I am in the mid-career, there are people in apprenticeships or, you know, are just looking for or in their first dev jobs wanting to get to mid-career and senior. There's always something that you can teach somebody. So I think I try to, whenever I meet folks who are either like in boot camp or sort of like earlier in their career, I'm always asking them, it's like, are you interested in public speaking? Because you can like get into it early. It's a really great opportunity to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think I also do that behind the curtains. Like I'm like, oh, okay, what did you learn this week at your job? Why don't you
Mm-hmm.
share about it? Other people might have encountered that. The chances are super high.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely.
Yeah, so one of the tips you just gave is okay, so if you want to improve, you want to learn something, just send a proposal, and if you accept it, you're going to have to learn more about it. So this kind of pushes you to do it. And also doing public speaking. So you're learning about something technical and
Mhm.
you're practicing public speaking, which is a great
Mm-hmm.
skill to have.
Mhm.
Is there anything else, because you have a background in theater,
Mm-hmm.
and we see a lot of developers, myself included, that have some trouble, with talking to people and public speaking and all of those things. Do you have another tip for people that want to improve their public speaking skills beyond doing tech talks and things like that, just so they can feel a little more confident, or
Mhm.
you know
Yeah, definitely. If, if you want to speak or present, big conferences are not the only places you can do that, right? I think smaller meetups are always looking for presenters, especially, well, for WNBRB, where Stephanie and I met, we just had an event this past Tuesday for first time speakers that want to get into technical speaking, and they're short lightning talks, so like 5 to 10 minutes chunks or presentations that just kind of get you out there and get you kind of understanding what that like feeling
Mhm.
of presenting is like. And I think besides the technical things and like the public speaking itself as a skill, what I learned a lot from doing conference talks is about myself, you know, because I think some mentors and speakers, they can give you all the tips about, how to put together a presentation, for example. But you really have to learn what works for you. For example, when my first talk, my first practice of a draft pretty much bombed. I did it internally for my company, and what came out of that practice was I eventually kind of revamped the entire presentation, just based on sort of like their feedback. Because what I was being kind of mentored to do is, you have your speaker notes, right? You have bullet points of things that you want to talk about and hit. But what I learned about myself through that practice is that coming up with words and like full sentences that make sense and transition together on the spot is difficult for me. So one of the engineers on our team then gave me the advice that her first talk, she wrote down every single word that she was going to say on stage, essentially in like a script format. And she practiced from that and eventually like semi-memorized it. And that's how she gave her presentation. And so from that advice, I was like, that's what I need, because I need to think about my words ahead of time. Is what I did for this conversation too, is like think through things in not just bullet points, but full sentences, so that I don't have to be kind of charged with coming up with those words right on the spot. So what I would say is definitely practice a lot and don't wait till the last minute if you are wanting to give presentations, but find what works for you. Like something that works for other people, even majority of people might not work for you. So try lots of things.
Yeah, those are really, really great tips. I think, what's most important is for you to put yourself to win. So, for example, maybe getting started at talking at your company is the best way for you to get started. And also, you don't have to give a new talk every time. You could
Not at all.
You could start as a 5-minute talk at your job. Then you nail that. You are confident with your progress. Then you're like, okay, I will do a 10-minute version of this one until you keep challenging yourself, and you don't have to focus that much on coming up with new ideas. You make sure to really focus on your public speaking skills. So that might take the pressure off, I guess.
Definitely.
Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned about your progression in your career was, I was kind of leaning into the discomfort a little bit, and I didn't want to hit a plateau, so I wanted to keep improving. And then eventually found some problems, talk to your manager about those problems, kind of create your own role in a way. Do you think that the skills you had, let's call it the soft skills, but like people management skills and things like that, do you think those skills helped you progress more quickly in your developer career? Because we see a lot of people with those problems, right? They're kind of mid-level, they have the technical expertise, they have the skills, but they don't know how to talk to a customer, or they get nervous, talking to their team, asking for feedback, they kind of run away from one-on-ones and things like that. So do you think that, is there a way to maybe practice those skills or get better at them? Because some people think that, oh, dealing with people, managing people, you have to have the right personality to have those skills. But in my opinion, these are just skills, right? You can practice and get better. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And we've talked about sort of like the way that I have sort of progressed and provide more value to my team is in a lot of that people skill, communication skill, the soft skills, as you say, right? And I think there's a balance to everything, right? And going back to all the way to the beginning where we were talking about reflecting on your career, where you have been, where you want to go, I think that what you want today might not be what you wanted 3 months ago, 6 months ago, or even a year ago. And I think in some recent reflections of my own career is that, okay, I have provided a lot of sort of soft skill contributions, but it's always a trade-off, right? So you look at that, you're like, oh, Mina's kind of contributed so much. It's like, okay, but now I want to grow more in my like technical side of things, right? So then you kind of take stock of that, recognize that, and then pivot your strategy. So everything comes with practice. If somebody comes in and they're super, technically savvy and just can solve all kinds of problems in code, but has a hard time relating or communicating with their teammates or stakeholders or whatnot. All of those things, I think, start with recognizing that's maybe not your strong suit, and recognizing that that's what you want, right? Because somebody in that skill level, or that's with that skill set I just described, who's super technical but might not be the best communicator, do they want to be a better communicator, right? I think it's recognizing, yes, I want to be a better communicator. That's step one. And then finding sort of strategies and opportunities to get better at those things. Like I said, I'm really privileged to have good managers who who go through that conversation with me and help me figure out where I need to and want to grow, and then advocate for opportunities for me or create opportunities for me in the like hiring coordinator instance to let me grow in a way I want to, right? So that's what I had been doing. And I think recent reflections is identifying, for me, for example, I want to grow more in my technical skills. So now I'm going to pivot strategies or find different opportunities to grow in that way. So they say, the first step to recovery is identifying you have a problem, but it's that sense, but I don't like those words as much. It's the first step to growth is identifying what you want, really.
Yeah, that's super key. Thank you for touching on that, because there's always a million things that we all want to do, but for you to keep doing something that you are really bad at it has to be something that really matters to you. So definitely you need to take that time to identify, does it really matter to me? And also, it's like you said, it's always trying to find the balance. There's always going to be trade-offs. My therapist said recently this beautiful quote: we are all work in progress until we decide to stop growing. If you're not struggling, you're not changing. So embrace that, make sure to make mistakes and learn from them, and keep moving forward.
Keep moving forward.
And I also love the idea of kind of inviting help in a way, talking to your manager and say, oh, I want to get better at this. Can you help me? Can you guide me? Can you create opportunities for me to grow? That's really important.
Yeah, it's also important to have people around you to help you reframe some of those things, right? We at Tenderland, we as a company all did our Clifton Strength Finder. It's not really a quiz, but a survey to sort of find where kind of natural affinities lay and grow in those ways. And I have gone back to those results time and again, kind of to understand how and where I need, like in what direction I want to grow.
Love it. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mina. Can't wait to see where you are going next.
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure it's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
And you are gonna love it. So we will make sure to keep in touch to get there.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, for sure. Keep me accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, Mina, if anyone wants to ask you a specific question or just say, hey, this was an amazing episode, just throwing it out there, where can people find you?
Yeah, I am on Twitter. Mina R528 is my handle. I am also on Instagram. I have a book themed Instagram called Prismatic Pages. You can find me there. I'm on Instagram way more than I am on Twitter. So drop in. I'd love to meet people.
Loved it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mina, for coming. It was a great conversation, and I'm sure people will learn a lot from this conversation.
I think I learned a lot from this conversation. So
People will learn a lot from this conversation.
See, you don't have to be perfect
Yeah.
to do stuff. So.
That's what editing's for.
Exactly. Okay, so thank you everyone for listening. Make sure to share this episode with your friends if you liked it, and see you in the next one.
Do you feel like you're too experienced to be a junior, but not enough to be a senior? Are you feeling stuck in your career? What if you could take your software engineering skills to the next level?
Take control of your career. Know what steps to take to make the jump to senior.
Join the free Get to Senior crash course and receive 5 email lessons over the next 2 weeks.
Learn how to identify opportunities to work on challenging projects on your job. Get instructive feedback and support to keep your skills sharp while on the job.
Go to hexdevs.com/senior-crash-course and get started today. Or look at the show notes and click on the link.
Thank you so much for listening. Let us know what you liked to learn more from this episode, and see you in the next one.
Bye.